get it, do they?
No.
Record high rents. The average rent outside of London has risen to almost £1,300 a month.
And we'll be telling you all our gossip from the Conservative Party conference.
Yes, that's the first one. I think it was probably my 33rd one. I was trying to work it out. I don't think it really was.
Was it the first time you came home in a minibus, though?
Certainly was the first one I came in and can I tell you, the last time too. Thank you, RMT, because it was ASLEF, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. No, we came back in a very jolly people's carrier. We are
carrier.
We are the people's channel.
It was definitely a minibus.
It was
honestly.
a minibus.
We will show you some pictures of our GB News trip home. But let us know your thoughts this morning as we reflect on what the Conservative Party told you over the last 3 days. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here's the very latest news with Rhiannon.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 9:32. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is set to urge leaders to join forces to tackle illegal migration and protect Europe's borders from criminal gangs. Rishi Sunak's travelling to Spain a day after almost 700 migrants arrived on the Canary Islands in wooden boats. Heads of state and European presidents are meeting in Granada for a summit. He's keen to get illegal migration on the agenda. Downing Street's also expected to announce initiatives to increase intelligence sharing and operational cooperation with Belgium, Bulgaria and Serbia. Rent prices for homes have increased to the highest level on record. The average charge for a property, excluding London, is now almost £1,300 a month. It's the 15th consecutive quarter that the record's been broken. In the capital, average rents rose to more than £2,600 per month. The research by Rightmove also shows demand is higher, with properties receiving 25 inquiries compared to 8 before the pandemic. The Transport Secretary says cancelling HS2 will allow investments that fit the needs of the country. It's after the Prime Minister announced the northern leg of the high-speed rail line has been scrapped. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson and former Prime Minister David Cameron both criticised the decision, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has been lost. Mark Harper told GB News the facts have changed.
Every penny that we save from cancelling that's £36 billion, and reinvesting every penny across the North, the Midlands and the rest of the country on important transport infrastructure that the people of this country want. So I think that's just changing what we're investing, still investing in transport, but having investments that fit the needs of the country and recognise the facts have changed about the costs of HS2.
And a watchdog says Southern Water and Thames Water received the most complaints from customers over the past year. The Consumer Council for Water says the more than 20 million people served by the two firms were being let down by their failure to understand and deal with the high levels of complaints. They've been labelled standout poor performers, with Southern Water getting almost 3 times more complaints than average for water and sewage companies. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back over to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning to you. So before we get into Rishi Sunak's speech, we just want to share with you, our viewers, our experience of being at the Conservative Party conference. This is the glamorous journey back. That's Liam Halligan, you can see there on the left of your screen. Catherine Forster, our political reporter. Me in the pink suit. Andrew Pearce just poking his head up behind Liam Halligan there. Head of TV, Ben Briscoe, in the middle. And Tom Harwood just peeping out from behind. That is no expense spared, Andrew Pearce.
No expense spared. We are definitely the People's Channel. That was not glamorous, unglamorous, I would say, actually. It took a very long time, that journey. Thank you, ASLEF, Train Drivers Union, for causing chaos. At least we didn't have to go up. I went up on Friday to avoid the train strike, but we got back in one piece, and it would be fair to say quite a lot was imbibed.
Well, there was a few tins of gin and tonic consumed on the journey back, which, frankly, we'd all been working very hard for a few days, very long days. I think we deserved it.
I was amazed to see Liam Halligan, that big, strapping 6'4" Irish lad, drinking all the pink gin and tonics. What was that about?
Right, so let's look at the highlights of the conference. Rishi Sunak announced some of what he describes as radical policies.
The Labour Party have set out their stall to do and say as little as possible and hopes no one notices. They want to take people's votes for granted and keep doing politics the same old way. So if this country is to change, then it can only be us who will deliver it. Today I will set out how we will achieve this, beginning with a set of long-term decisions to build a brighter future for our children and to fundamentally change our country.
The word change many times in that speech, because what he's trying to do is reinvent himself, and the Tory party have been in power for 13, nearly 14 years. He's trying to say, I'm new, I've got a new vision. And actually, I think it was a good speech, because he's not a brilliant orator, let's be honest.
No, I think it was a good speech.
There was a lot in it.
There was a lot in it, and it was a good speech. It was very engaging. Obviously, having his wife, Akshanta Murphy, to start with, I found a little odd, I have to say.
And she spoke for too long.
And she spoke for way too long. And if having her on stage was designed to humanise him, it just kind of gave the impression that she was super posh, and actually sort of confirmed the idea that he's from a billionaire family. And I'm sorry, nobody likes their husband that much. Nobody likes their husband that much. He's my best friend, we're amazing. Come on.
Yeah, why didn't she say he never does the washing up?
Yes.
Or he never does the drying up? Or he always leaves his pants on the floor? That sort of thing, which is what happens with...
Would be relatable, yeah. But let us know what you thought of it, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Simon Danchik's here, former Labour MP. Simon, as a Labour man, looking at that comment, how well do you think he did?
I think he did quite well, if I'm being objective and fair about this, not tribal. I think he did pretty well. His back's against the wall. He's come out fighting. He's got people in the room that want his job. And he's made a speech, and talking about his tone and everything else, I actually thought, listening to him, he sounded a bit like Tony Blair. You were right, actually. He's not a very good orator.
I think there's a problem
with your mic, Simon, so we're going to get that fixed, because we want to hear from you. So it means we have to hear a bit more from... Let's hear a little more from Rishi Sunak. Well, my highlight was the speech. The two speeches, which were a great success, were Kemi Badenoch, the Home Secretary's,
Suella Braverman.
And I think Rishi Sunak delivered a pretty good speech.
I do think he did a good speech. Well, I mean, we were joking about the fact that we had left early. We left in the minibus. That's because a lot of people had left early because of obviously the massive train strike yesterday. So the conference centre itself was quieter, but the hall was packed when Rishi Sunak gave his speech. Obviously introduced on stage by Penny Mordaunt, who did a tub-thumping military-esque sort of introduction, which pitching for the leadership.
14 times. We've got Simon Tanchuk back. You're mic'd up, Simon. So you're saying from an objective point of view...
Yeah, from an objective view, he performed particularly well. His back is up against the wall and he's come out fighting. He's got people in the room that want his job, Suella Braverman and others, and yet he's come out, made quite a good speech. We talked about the tone of his speech. I think he sounded a little bit like Tony Blair, actually, in terms of making this speech. He's not a great orator, as you point out, but he performed particularly well. And what he has done is create some dividing lines with Labour. And he's really challenging Labour. Do you agree with the cuts in HS2? He'll probably have a vote on it in Parliament. Net zero, he'll have a vote on it in Parliament. Does Labour agree with this or not? Labour have already voted against the Rwanda policy in the illegal immigration bill. So he's really challenging them. They've been trying to sit on the fence, let the Conservatives lose the next general election. He's bringing them into the fight.
And you were a Northern MP for many years. How well do you think he sold the idea of ditching London to Manchester, which we know, well, Lord Berkeley, who's the great expert on it, who said would probably have cost £180 billion. How well do you think did he get away with it by saying he's going to spend the £36 billion that was originally earmarked on lots of different transport projects in the North and the Midlands? Did he get away with it?
Well, I think he did. I am a regular commuter up to Manchester and back. I go up later today, so I'm up and down all the time.
You're not going in a minibus?
No, I'm
GBNews minibus.
I'm going on Avanti West Coast. It's probably better in the minibus. But and there is a capacity issue there, especially if we want to move haulage onto the rail more and take it off the roads. But there is this big issue about it costing an absolute fortune.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think he'll get brownie points for having made the decision he has. And bear in mind, you know, you hear from Andy Burnham with a very simplistic argument. I've got close family members who have no desire to come to London, who've never been to London. So they have no skin in the game in terms of HS2.
I think it's the case for a lot of people, actually.
Absolutely.
I mean,
so I think he's got away with it.
I mean, Bev's from Manchester. And you don't...
Lots of my friends up there were saying, we weren't bothered anyway. We don't need to get to London 10 minutes quicker or get back from London 10 minutes quicker. It doesn't matter. Improve the Wi-Fi on the service.
Yes.
Don't just try to emulate the French model and somehow show we don't need it, we didn't want it necessarily, and the money is extortionate. So I think the fact that he's pulled the plug on that is, I think, is very popular with people, except Andy Burnham.
Yeah. And of course, he's going to put pressure on Labour next week. What is because Starmer's conference is next week?
Yeah.
Is he going to endorse this and then cancel all the other projects that he's talking about? Hull and Leeds and Liverpool, all going to benefit.
Yeah, that's right. It really makes it... It's dragging Starmer into the fight, isn't it? That's what it's all about. I think there are real questions about why it's run over so much. And Cameron, Gordon Brown, others coming out, Osborne coming out saying he shouldn't cancel it, even Johnson saying he shouldn't cancel it. They've been responsible for it, the overrun in terms of the cost.
Oh, it's disgusting.
And Boris Johnson cancelled the link to Leeds.
Yes.
Who's he to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, given that we're spending £110 billion on the debt alone in this country, we can do without these projects which are just looking profligate to people. Well, they don't look it, they are profligate.
And what do you cut? What's the alternative cuts that you're going to make? So I think he will get some credit
I hope
for having made tough decisions.
What about the smoking ban? He's aping what happened in New Zealand. So if you're 14, they're going to raise the year every year how old you are to buy. Look, at the moment you can't buy a fag if you're 14. Do we need this ban?
Well, I'm an ex-smoker, and I enjoy the fumes from cigarettes that I smell now. You know, I could have a cigarette tomorrow or today even.
But don't.
No, because once I have one, I can't smoke socially. I'm back into it. So I think something has to be done about it, but it does seem exceptionally draconian, doesn't it? So I am a bit libertarian on these issues and think if people want to smoke, they should.
Instinctively I am, but when I think about it, we just don't want kids to smoke.
No.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And if we make it more difficult for them to smoke, isn't that a good thing?
I think, isn't the problem, isn't the issue that kids aren't smoking? A lot of people aren't smoking, so suddenly the tobacco industry and actually the government taxes on smoking, they're not getting them in the same way. So funnily enough, they're like, OK, well, we can move on smoking. They're not really fixing a problem because the problem isn't really there anymore. One of the biggest public health triumphs, I would say, has been the ban on smoking inside in public areas. It's had a massive impact. I'm not comfortable with the idea that the state can tell an adult you can't buy a product that is available.
And it will push it underground, inevitably, won't it?
100%.
Nigel Farage made that point. The underground fags industry is now going to go into overdrive. And of course, if they start with smoking, what about then processed meat? Very bad for obesity crisis. What about alcohol?
So naturally, I think it's not right to go as far as he's doing.
What do you think Keir Starmer would do with it, Simon, with that?
Oh, I think that's interesting because he's probably on the same page, I would have imagined. Just instinctively think that Starmer would probably buy into that.
But Sunak was clever. He said it will be a free vote. He's not going to make this a party issue. So Tory MPs don't want to do it because there are a lot of libertarians on the backbench who would take your views. Doing that.
I don't think it'll get through, actually.
You don't?
No.
That's very interesting. What do you think a lot of your ex-colleagues will...
Well, and I would have been the same. I came into Parliament after the vote on whether you could smoke inside in pubs, and I would have compromised on that if I'd have been voting, because a lot of working class people enjoy a cigarette. And I have some sympathy with that.
Me
too. The thing
too.
about that smoking ban I really objected to was when they said private clubs weren't allowed to... Actually... Mind it. That should be up to members of private clubs to take that decision. They imposed it. But actually, people have got along with it now, haven't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
He did say he's going to crack down on the marketing of vapes because we've talked about it many times on this show. Parents and grandparents watching at home get very incensed. I am one of them about the fact that these vape products are targeted to children. But I'd like to know a little bit more on the detail of that. What does a crackdown on the marketing of them mean? Because it doesn't sound like he's going to put many limits on those businesses.
I think he's going to say that Are they really going to say you can no longer have a bubblegum flavoured vape? I mean, are they really going to get into the minutiae of that?
I don't think they can do that, but where they are promoted and where they, you know, marketed, I think they can probably affect it as they have done with gambling and everything else.
I don't know if you're reassured that a man is a man and a woman's a woman, because Rishi Sunak was quite clear about that. Your bloke, Keir Starmer, struggles with this.
Keir does struggle with it, and it will be something that the public are reminded about up to the day of the election, isn't it? Quite rightly. I mean, Keir has just called it wrong on a number of those sort of cultural, social issues, whether it's taking the knee in his office for Black Lives Matter through to struggling to define a woman. These are real problems for Keir, actually.
Can we just want to say that your son Milton came to see us on the stand yesterday.
He was terrific.
Lovely Milton. Here he is. He was on the show yesterday. We gave him a little bit of work experience. Simon, you'll be pleased to know.
Age 15, and he's a member of the Tory party. So unlike his father, he's seeing the true light.
Yes, he joined several months ago, and unbeknown to me, and then when we were having a chat one day, he says, "Oh, by the way, I've joined the Conservative Party." And ever since, he's been campaigning in Rochdale. He's met Rishi Sunak. He's met Suella Braverman. He's enjoying it.
Are you pleased?
I'm really pleased. I put out a tweet, you know, a few weeks ago saying I'm really proud of him. People who get involved in public life, you know, it's a tough gig, isn't it, if we're honest about it. But he's really going for it. He enjoys it.
Amazing.
I warned him against the danger of making a speech on the conference platform, age 15. Remember William Hague?
Yes.
Haunted by that speech for the rest of his life, wasn't he?
Yes, I've seen that.
Right, Simon Danchuk, great to see you. OK, GBNews presenter Arlene Foster joins us now. Morning, Arlene.
There she is.
There she is.
There I am.
So broadly, Arlene, what did you make of Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday at the conference?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to see that you guys got back from your school trip yesterday and you made it safely home to the studio today. I think I agree with Simon. I thought it was well delivered for a man who's not naturally an orator. I thought it was hugely interesting that he invoked the spirit of Margaret Thatcher on a number of occasions. He quoted Margaret Thatcher. He also made reference to the fact that she was a grocer's daughter. He was a pharmacist's son. He was trying to make those parallels with her. I'm wanting to go back to her as opposed to any of the other Conservative leaders since then, because, of course, he's essentially said we've had 30 years of status quo. That includes, of course, those Conservative leaders that have gone before him, and, of course, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So I thought that was hugely interesting, actually.
Is he Margaret Thatcher? Do you see him in the same mould as the great radical Margaret Thatcher, Arlene?
No, I don't see him in that mould at all. He tries to appeal to that for very obvious reasons, because she is still hugely popular with many of the grassroots members. But you cannot say that you're imbibing the spirit of Margaret Thatcher and then bringing out this phased progressive ban on cigarettes, because she simply would never have brought that in.
So what do you think emboldens him to make those sorts of decisions, which is state overreach, in my opinion? How is he able to do that in the way that Margaret Thatcher just would never have?
I think he's saying, look, we have an issue here with health. We want to stop people from having cancer. We need to step forward, and it's in the public good. I think it's right that he has had a free vote on this in the Commons. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in relation to that. I mean, none of us want to see our children smoking, none of us. But actually, in a bizarre way, I think this makes it quite attractive for young people. They'll be saying, oh, right, it's going to be banned. So should we look at this, and is it something we should try? And I think that is really, really regressive.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I also was a bit surprised if he wants to talk about public health, and he said he built up to dinner, we have an emergency, we have a health emergency. I thought he was going to say obesity, actually, and a lack of exercise.
Didn't mention the word.
Didn't mention it. That is actually the problem, which is crippling the NHS largely. I thought that was a big omission from the speech. Did you, Arlene?
Yeah, well, he did try to cover a lot of areas in the speech yesterday. I thought, and that's actually the issue. It wasn't one big idea in the fashion that Thatcher would have given us in some of her speeches. There were a number of different parts to his speech, and he tried to cover a whole range of issues. Tried to say that he was the radical choice as opposed to the status quo of Keir Starmer, which I think actually is quite interesting and quite clever from his perspective, because Keir Starmer is very much an establishment man, comes from a legal background. I thought his point about all three of the Labour leaders coming from the same square mile in North London was quite clever as well. So he was pointing out that these people all come from the same stable, whereas in the Conservative Party, and you cannot deny this, there is a whole range of people from different backgrounds, and you've just heard of Simon's son there joining the Conservative Party, a whole range of people from different backgrounds getting involved because they believe in aspiration, in hope, and that's what Thatcher was about. Hope, aspiration, that's what it was about.
Right.
Thanks, Eileen.
Foster, lovely to talk to you. Now, the average rent for a home across Britain, excluding London, has reached almost £1,300 a month.
One of the factors driving rising rents is not enough available rental properties to meet the demand.
Well, we've got in the studio with us Richard Blanco, who's a property expert, and you're from the National Residential Landlords Association. £1,300, that's a lot of money.
Yes, I mean, what the Rightmove stats tell us is that they've gone up by 10% nationally, but that's for newly let properties. So it's important that we look at the other figure, which is the Office of National Statistics, which is that they've gone up by 5.5% across all rents. What's happening is there's a huge shortage of rental property. Rightmove points out there's an average of 25 people queuing for each property. And I've had that experience myself. I've just let a property, actually, in East London, where I advertised it on a Friday. It was let by a Saturday. So it's really, really tough for tenants out there. And the main reason is that landlords are starting to sell up quite substantially. 37% tell us that they're thinking of selling in the next 12 months.
But why is that? Is that because mortgage rates, interest rates have gone up? Is that the big problem?
It is partly because of mortgage rates and making the whole business unaffordable, really. But it's really because of the tax changes that George Osborne brought in 2015. So what happened was he was wanting to deter landlords from letting properties so that he could bring in more home ownership. And he brought in punitive tax changes that meant that you couldn't set the mortgage costs against on your tax return. And the effect that he wanted was for landlords to leave the market, and that's what's starting to happen. Campaigners then said it was a tenant tax, and lo and behold, it's turned out to be a tenant tax.
It was so infuriating, because what he was doing, he was demonising landlords. He wants everybody to think that landlords have thousands of properties, but the average landlord probably has one extra property which they rent out.
It's absolutely
Isn't that true?
The vast majority of landlords has one or two properties, and landlords provide 19% of the housing in the UK. It tends to be the housing that's in city centres, that people need for jobs, that students need, that young people need when they leave home, that newlyweds might need until they can afford to buy. So it's a really vital part of the housing economy, and we really need the government to look again at tax reform, as indeed Clive Betts, who's the Labour chair of the Housing Select Committee, has said too.
And so because people can't afford to buy, because they can't save a deposit and or they can't now afford these excruciating interest rates, the market is flooded with renters. Is that right? But the quantity has not increased. That's what's happened. It's supply and demand.
Yes, it's supply and demand. I would call it a supply crisis. Yes, people are not buying at the moment because, of course, mortgage rates are too high, and they're just kind of waiting for the market to settle, which we think might happen next year. But, you know, there is a supply crisis.
Do you think it will happen next year? I know friends who are looking to buy, and they're just waiting to see what happens. So they're waiting and waiting and waiting for the crash, and then
or do they think a new government's going to change everything?
Well, I think
it won't.
No, they won't.
No, I mean, political uncertainty does weigh on the housing market, and it makes people sort of wait and see. But I think what we're seeing is we've seen house prices fall by 5.3% according to the nationwide stats in 12 months to September. People are saying we're looking at about a 10% fall from peak to trough. So I would imagine that will, reach its trough by the end of by the middle of next year. And people are waiting for that. Really.
Richard Blanco, thank you so much. Bit bleak, that, isn't it? Right, still to come this morning, Rishi Sunak vows to ban smoking for the next generation. How do you feel about that? gbnews@gbnews.com is the email address. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello there. Good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Definitely a mixed picture across the UK during today. We've already got rain spreading into parts of Northern Ireland, really quite a wet, damp start to the day here. That is pushing its way into western parts of Scotland and then will eventually reach parts of northern England and Wales as well. But southeastern areas of England and even the far northeast of Scotland in the Northern Isles staying largely dry for most of the day with some sunny spells as well. Will be southeastern England that sees those higher temperatures though, generally reaching around 19 degrees Celsius. A bit cooler where you are stuck underneath the rain, and particularly for northeast Scotland around 12 degrees Celsius there. Quite gusty at times, some gales around the Irish Sea coastal areas. That rain though will spread its way eastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Eventually a few drabs pushing their way across southeastern areas as well, but most places largely turning dry as we head into the second half of the night. Still just some random showers pushing their way through at times. A lot of cloud around though, and still the breeze in place, so that will help mix up the air and prevent our temperatures dropping too far at all. Most of us seeing quite a mild night, around 14-15 degrees Celsius. We then see this lingering rain start to push its way into parts of Scotland throughout Friday. This pulse as it heads in later on in the afternoon as well could provide some quite heavy and persistent rain, so worth watching out for that. But again, a fairly fine dry start and end to the day across southern areas with some sunny spells in there as well. Temperatures beginning to climb with that southerly airflow around 21 degrees Celsius, even higher as we head into the weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of October. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce. It has finally happened.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
Minister Rishi Sunak said goodbye to HS2 and unveiled the £36 billion Network North transport projects to replace the high-speed line between Manchester and Birmingham.
Unlikely policy or a pipe dream? Rishi Sunak said increasing the legal age of smoking annually will be the single biggest intervention in public health in a generation. Is he right?
Smoking places huge pressures on the NHS and costs our country £17 billion a year. We have a chance to cut cancer deaths by a quarter, significantly ease those pressures and protect our children, and we should take it.
And Just Stop Oil strike again. Last night, they brought a performance of Les Miserables at the Sondheim Theatre in London to a halt. 5 people have been arrested. The protesters were not welcomed warmly by the audience.
A bit more than that. Now, record high rents. The average rent outside of London has risen to almost £1,300 a month.
Funnily enough, you never see them at football grounds.
Funny that. I wonder why. Do you think it's because football fans would take the matters into their own hands?
I think so.
And whack them?
They're cowardly. I mean, like you heard there, the worst they got was somebody in the crowd shouting,
You
naughty people, and then you nasty people.
Yeah, I would be incensed.
Oh, me too.
I love the theatre, and tickets now are not cheap. That would have been probably an average cost ticket, £100 to £120. People have to save up for it, and these idiots try to ruin their evening.
Absolutely. Let us know your thoughts. gbfuse@gbnews.com. Email as always. First, though, here is your very latest news with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister's set to urge leaders to join forces to tackle illegal migration and protect Europe's borders from criminal gangs. Rishi Sunak's travelling to Spain a day after almost 700 migrants arrived on the Canary Islands in wooden boats. Heads of state and European presidents are meeting in Granada for a summit. Mr Sunak will co-chair talks with the Italian Prime Minister on the need to address rising levels of illegal migration. Downing Street's also expected to announce initiatives to increase intelligence sharing and operational cooperation with Belgium, Bulgaria and Serbia. Rent prices for homes have increased to the highest level on record. The average charge for property, excluding London, is now almost £1,300 a month. It's the 15th consecutive quarter that the record's been broken. In the capital, average rents rose to more than £2,600 per month. The research by Rightmove also shows demand is higher, with properties receiving 25 inquiries compared to 8 before the pandemic. Property expert Russell Quirk says the rise was inevitable.
Supply, so the amount of rental properties available, has also dropped. So the numbers state that there's about 35% fewer properties available. So you've got demand up, supply down. There's only one inevitable consequence of that, which is that prices will increase significantly, as indeed they are.
The Transport Secretary says cancelling HS2 will allow investments that fit the needs of the country. It's after the Prime Minister announced the northern leg of the high-speed rail line has been scrapped. Former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and David Cameron both criticised the decision, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has been lost. Mark Harper told GB News the facts have changed.
Every penny that we save from cancelling that's £36 billion, and reinvesting every penny across the North, the Midlands and the rest of the country on important transport infrastructure that the people of this country want. So I think that's just changing what we're investing, still investing in transport, but having investments that fit the needs of the country and recognise the facts have changed about the costs of HS2.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has been reported to police in Scotland over comments he made about Nicola Sturgeon. He made reference to the former First Minister during his speech at the Conservative Party conference yesterday. Ms Sturgeon was arrested, questioned and released without charge as part of an ongoing investigation into SNP finances. The General Secretary of the pro-independence Alba Party has reported Rishi Sunak to police, accusing him of contempt of court. A watchdog says Southern Water and Thames Water received the most complaints from customers over the past year. The Consumer Council for Water says the more than 20 million people served by the two firms were being let down by their failure to understand and deal with the high levels of complaints. They've been labelled standout poor performers, with Southern Water getting almost 3 times more complaints than average for water and sewage companies. And Just Stop Oil protesters are being criticised for interrupting the West End performance of Les Miserables in central London. Activists fixed themselves to the stage using flexible bike locks and forced the production to end early. The chief executive says he recognises freedom of expression is important, but added that the audience has a right to enjoy an event they've paid for. 5 people were arrested and refunds are being offered to the theatre-goers. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio, and on your smart speaker by saying Play GB News. Now it's back over to Andrew and Beth.
Good morning, it's 10:06. It is the morning after the Conservative Party conference. Your head's all right?
Just about.
Just about.
Despite the minibus ride.
You've been getting in touch at home. Alistair has said, hi, Bev and Andrew, great show. Thank you, Alistair. HS2 question. If the project started in the north, heading south, would it have been cancelled?
It's a very good point, and I still don't understand why they launched it from London to Birmingham when it was all about the north. It should have started in Leeds or Manchester.
Gone down. John has said the government has a drive to stop people smoking, but it ignores the far greater problem, the ever-increasing drug addiction. And Paul has said Sunak's speech was awful. He didn't mention the cost of living once, and he spent over half of his speech talking about HS2. Good point. Sometimes these speeches are more interesting when you consider what was left out, as opposed to what was in it.
He didn't talk about tax either, because he's got nothing to say on tax, because he's not going to cut... Well, he is going to cut tax, I think, for the election, but we have got the biggest tax burden on this country for 70 years.
Yeah, keep your emails coming, gbviews@gbnews.com, and we will get to them.
Now, the Prime Minister laid out his stall with that keynote speech. What did you think of it at the Tory Party conference?
There was a wide range of policy announcements, from scrapping A-levels and the HS2 link to Manchester, as well as outlawing cigarettes for future generations.
But joining us to talk about this is the Conservative Party activist Haz Ahmed, who's worked on many election campaigns in his time. Haz, morning to you. I know you've worked with Rishi Sunak too. He's not a great orator, is he? But I think this was probably his best speech.
Good morning to you both, and I hope you've all got us home safe. Yes, so look, Rishi in my view, is a great orator. I've seen him campaign many times. He's had the room to him. This speech itself was brilliant in a way that when you were in the audience at that time listening to his speech, you could just feel that energy of, OK, what he's saying actually makes sense. And Conservative activists were really engaged in listening to him and giving him that time, because a lot of people came in with thinking, oh, this is the first speech for him as a Prime Minister. Let's see what it's all about. But actually, this was a very measured speech, and people gave him the time that it deserves.
But Haz, what about that email we just read out from somebody saying he didn't mention the cost of living crisis? The cost of living crisis is the single biggest issue facing people listening to this programme and watching it.
Yeah, I spoke to a few activists as well, and I think they also mentioned that I think cost of living crisis, also housing, which as a young person myself, you earlier mentioned about renting. I think addressing those would have been quite important to many of the younger party activists and also other members. But again, the Prime Minister set out his priorities. There was also a lot of news on the HS2, but he also focused on education, which again was quite important. He also talked about the Jude's Law, which gave life for life, and how he's going to tackle criminal gangs and criminals. So there were a lot of priorities discussed, but perhaps a little bit more emphasis on cost of living would have been very helpful, sure.
Was it a Conservative speech for you, Haz? I mean, we were up there in Manchester. Nigel Farage walks in and he is mobbed by Conservatives, capital C, small c, both, you know, and they love him and they want to see a little bit more of that strong fighting talk that they get from Nigel Farage on GB News every night, 7 o'clock. Was Rishi Sunak enough of that for you?
As I mentioned earlier, Rishi is a measured person. He's a person who looks at what's in front of him and deals with it accordingly, which is exactly why he's announced those HS2 policies. Nigel is popular because Nigel says things which are slightly controversial a lot of the time, but it echoes with a lot of the right-wing thinkers and those in the party who align themselves slightly to Nigel's viewpoint. But Rishi's, in many ways, was a lot more measured, was a lot more calm and focused, but also he has to look at the reality in the way we face it today. That's why I think Rishi's speech hit a lot more of the core voters, core activists in the party as well. So, yeah, I mean, Nigel has his own popularity, but Rishi himself, as a prime minister, he has to be, again, very careful in what he has to say and doesn't have to go, you know, saying too much at once.
Haz, what did you make of the idea of the prime minister's wife coming on stage to introduce him? I thought quite a good idea. Gordon Brown's wife did it, Sarah, some years ago. She did go on a bit.
It was a lovely speech, and Akshata is a wonderful person. Honestly, she was also in conference really engaging with activists, and I just thought it was really sweet of her to be really talking to people, and it was quite personable. You could just feel that it came from a place where we see Rishi Sunak as a person who's, as you know, on TV, but it was more about it coming from a place where this is a man who I love and he really cares about his country. She also talked about aspiration, that Rishi had aspiration from very early on, and she really loved that about him. I mean, I remember last year when Rishi Sunak said that Akshata ditched heels for him. So, you know, there really is a lot of love there, and a lot of people said it's very American style, but actually it's what people wanted to see. And
it's a bit you know what, Haz? It is a bit saccharine for my taste, and I think most British women married to their husband for as long as they've been together would struggle to stand on a speech and say they're nothing but perfect. I think that she needed to temper it with a little bit of realism about the fact that sometimes he must drive her mad, or maybe he doesn't, because otherwise it looks a bit inauthentic.
Leaves his smelly socks on the floor, that sort of thing, because a lot of husbands do.
It was all a bit too polished for my liking.
You'd want it to be a bit more like that. I mean, you know, who wouldn't know? But I think she did say he likes a good rom-com. But again, it's Rishi Sunak and Akshata. They're wonderful couple, and honestly, they just get on really well. I've seen them around, and they are just as perfect as it could be. And to be honest,
was this also about another thing? Let's be clear here. She is the daughter of a billionaire. She's worth £780 million in her own right through the family firm. Was this an attempt to try to slay Labour's fox, because they're going to keep going on and on about how privileged and rich Rishi is, so how can he possibly understand the cost of living crisis? So present her as a nice, ordinary, loving wife. Was that what that was really about?
See, whenever I hear about how rich Akshata is, whenever I hear about how rich Rishi is, it reminds me back to the fact both of them actually started with absolutely nothing. Both of the families worked incredibly hard. Akshata's parents started with absolutely nothing, started a company, Infosys, and it's now one of the largest companies in the world. But also Rishi's parents as well. They also worked very hard to give him the education, the opportunities that he has, to make him the man he is today. So I think in many ways, a lot of people see the aspiration in Rishi Sunak and Akshata as is what they want to do, as what they aspire to be. And I think they really set a tone for how people want to aspire and become like most of them. And I think Labour doesn't really give off that aspiration to many of the people in the country, and in many ways which Akshata and Rishi have been able to provide.
Do you think there was enough in the speech to put Keir Starmer into various difficult corners, Haz?
Yes, absolutely. As we know, Keir Starmer doesn't really stand for anything. He says one thing and tomorrow is going to change. Again, his speech is coming up next week, and he's going to look at what Rishi Sunak has said, and then he's going to announce what he thinks is popular, what he thinks is popular by the measure of Twitter and what the Twitter folks say. But actually, Rishi, you know, who wants to talk about HS2 and who wants to cut him? It's a difficult decision. Rishi can say what is popular. Rishi can say, oh well, let's carry it on. Let's avoid all of this costs that we are having to put every year on year. But Rishi has to make the hard choices as Prime Minister. Keir Starmer can very easily say,
you know, one thing that I think has, sorry to interrupt you, but we just want to talk about this before we go, was a brave rejection of the trans activist lobby. And we know how powerful that group is when he said a man is a man, a woman is a woman, and that's just common sense. That was a very brave thing to say.
And he's predicted being attacked for it.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I don't really want to delve too much onto the gender stuff, but I think it's
why
Rishi's
get attacked as
exactly.
It's my own personal thing. I think it's a very sensitive thing to talk about.
Did you think he got it right?
It hit the tone with a lot of the members. I can say that for sure, because who have been, talking about whether this male is a male or women, and also what is happening within our educations. But for me, it's a very sensitive topic, which I think it's something that needs to be debated in a bit more thoroughly.
Well, I think women in particular will have welcomed that, because women are fed up with their women-only spaces being invaded by people purporting to be women.
Well, we're not fed up by it. We're frightened by it, actually. That's what I would say. We're quite scared by that march towards being erased as women. But I do think it's a conversation we have to have sensitively. Haz, thank you so much. Great to talk to you. Come on again. That was really interesting. Haz Ahmed there, who has worked on many election campaigns,
including working with Rishi. Now, still to come, should we ban these dangerous dog breeds, or are there owners to blame? There's been another fatality in the last week, of course. We're GB News, Britain's News Channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen, because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find, actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10:19. You're with Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So a murder investigation has been launched after a dog believed to be an XL bully killed a man in Sunderland.
There's been a spate of these attacks, of course, over the past few months. The Prime Minister says he's going to ban these dangerous dogs, but when?
That's right. We're joined now by Neil Parish, former Tory MP and Chair of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee. And Neil, you think these dogs should be banned. Also joining us now is Hannah Molly, canine behaviourist from Kent. You don't think this is the answer. Neil, let me come to you. It's awful when we see these headlines. This story broke yesterday about this other person losing their life at the jaws of one of these awful animals. Why should they be banned, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trouble is with the size of the dog, you know, the XL bully American dog, it is the size and scale of it, so that if it does turn nasty, it is particularly dangerous and particularly fatal in this case, which is terrible. I think the problem really is that all the time there's a criminal element very often out there who are training these dogs as protection dogs for themselves, and they will crossbreed and bring in another breed. So we've got to be careful all the time, not just to pick on the dog. We've got to make sure that the people handling them and looking after them are also looked into, because, you know, if you treat a dog in a very bad way in order to make it a status dog to protect you, perhaps you're drug dealing or whatever, you want some sort of protection, this is what we've got to watch out for. So I think we want to make sure it's the deed of the dog, not necessarily the breed. But I can understand in this case, the bigger the dog, the more dangerous they are. But the trouble is, you see, the criminal element out there will look for different crossbreeds and they will breed up something else. So we've got to be careful as we ban dogs that we just don't make it difficult for a legitimate dog owner and a passive dog. And this is why when we did inquiries into it, it's not quite as simple as just banning a breed, because they will look for another one.
OK, let's bring Hannah in. Hannah, we think so far in the last 12 months, 6 people have died as a result of being attacked by these XL bully dogs. Surely they have to be banned. And now?
I think for me, we really need to be looking at the symptom, not the symptom, but the cause. And this is often the problem when we go to banning breeds, is it's a symptom of a bigger cause. And that's what we've been asking government to really look at when we did our dog bite reform campaign with the APPG for dog welfare. We really looked at what's happening in the data, why is it happening, and what can we do to solve it. And what many experts have said is that actually, albeit banning breeds in the short term might make people feel a little safer, in the long term, we're really not getting to the root cause. And that's what we want. We want to see investment into communities. We want to rebuild communities that have been fractured by this breed ban. And
how long does that take, Molly? Hannah, sorry, how long does that take? We've got to ban these dogs now because we can't have any more fatalities or serious injuries. Children have been attacked by these wretched creatures.
Yes, I understand. And the thing is that it's a fashionable breed. So really, we have the same problem just 30 years later, and we haven't addressed the issue. What we would love to see is licensing and education for all dog owners. You know, the DVLA looks at licensing vehicles. We would love to see the DLA, the Dog Licensing Agency, so we can license dog owners and we can teach them and educate them. We can make sure they've got handling skills. We can license breeders. We can effectively regulate dog trainers. That's really what we want seeing, and investing in communities.
It seems such a sensible solution, and we've had this debate on the show, and licensing dog owners seems like it would just get unanimous support. But why isn't it happening, Neil? Where's the resistance?
Well, I think what the problem is that you've got the legitimate dog owner who will actually go to the courses and very much do the right thing. The other problem is that you still won't get to the criminal element, which is really the more dangerous, because they are the ones which train their dogs to be dangerous. And most dogs will be dangerous if you train them in that way. So I think we've got to, not only is it looking at legitimate dog owner, but we've got to have more resources out there looking for the dangerous dogs and those that are keeping dangerous dogs to protect themselves and will attack others. In the meantime, of course, make sure that these types of breeds are muzzled when they are out, so therefore that if they do get loose, they are not as dangerous. So the things we can do in between, I'm not so keen on making everybody have a license, because I feel all the time you are concentrating on the legitimate dog owner. We're still not got enough resources from council and government and others actually dealing with those in society.
But you see, I would just...
dangerous dogs.
But Hannah, you can't ever guarantee, can you, that a dog won't bite someone, even the nicest, most placid dog. So why not license them all?
Yeah, the truth is that we saw before, just after lockdown, and the Paw report showed us that over a third of dog owners had little to no recall. So we have an irresponsible dog ownership issue across the board, across the UK. And when we look at footage like the footage that you've just shown us, and we look at more of the veterinary forensic evidence around some of these cases, that particular dog in Birmingham, when caught, was taken to the vets, and it was found to have been so lacking in water that it almost died. It was immediately put on liquid. So that dog was out in the heat of the day on a day that it shouldn't have been out. It shouldn't have been out. It had a panic attack. It attacked lots of people. So, you know, what I would hate to see is that what we're doing is blaming an animal that we have bred, you know, ultimately dogs that are dangerously out of control in public, that have been badly bred or they're frustrated. We have created that problem, regardless of what the breed of dog is. So I totally hear that, you know, the criminal aspect for this, I would argue, is maybe 1%. And 99% of the issue is not being dealt with by banning this breed, is my thought.
Neil, you were an MP for a long time. The Prime Minister has said he's going to ban these dogs. How quickly can they do it? If there was a political will, and I can't see there's going to be any objections on the Labour benches and the Lib Dem benches, this could be done in 1 or 2 days, couldn't it? And it should be too.
Yeah, it can be done quite quickly because it can be attached to particular legislation, you know, that's going through Parliament, and so it can be done very quickly. It should be done. It can be done, I think, as secondary legislation, not as primary legislation. So it can be done quickly and bring it in and actually try and make sure that these dogs are banned. But like I said, in the future, we've got to be much more careful as to what dogs are bred, because they will breed another dangerous dog. That's the problem. But we must act now on this particular breed. No doubt about it.
OK, thank you both very much. Neil Parish there and Hannah Molly, canine behaviourist. You've all been getting in touch at home about this, actually. Here we go. Sorry. I know it was here somewhere. Edward says, why are people more interested in banning a dog breed than banning illegal immigrants? Illegal immigrants have committed many more crimes than these dogs. Thank you, Edward. Slightly different issue. Keith says, all dogs should be muzzled in public places.
I think that's right. And even if they're a Jack Russell, frankly, because they can be very yappy and difficult.
Yeah, if not, their owners should be fined big time. Enough is enough. And Angela says, stop blaming the dogs and put the blame where it squarely belongs, with the humans who own them. Well
he is going to do it. The Prime Minister said he's going to do it, but I talked to Neil Parish. Just get on with it. The House of Commons gets back after party conferences. By the way, why does the House of Commons close down for 3 weeks of party conferences? It's an outrage.
It is outrageous. They probably, yeah.
Why does government stop?
Yeah, it is ridiculous.
Really? I mean, how many MPs did you see at the Tory conference? Many.
I saw quite a few.
Don't forget there were 352 of them.
I didn't see that many. No, I did not see that many. But it was interesting to see who was there and who was watching MPs in the wild. Like, you know, you normally seeing who would stop and talk to people, who was friendly, who just put their head down and kept walking. Therese Coffey was there, and she was chatting away to people and looking very friendly. Liz Truss, head down, flanked by her entourage.
Priti Patel talking to everybody, that's because she's on a leadership campaign. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and in fact, I was just here at this point. In fact, I'm almost off shot because I was spying on the Prime Minister.
On the radio. This is
there I was! I didn't realise I'm in the back of that shot.
This is the Prime Minister meeting the exhibitors.
This was because I wanted to... This was early in the morning, very early in the morning, but I wanted to watch him with people. I wanted to see... and dogs. I wanted to see what he was like with people and whether he actually had genuine people skills and looked like he cared. And I have to say, from what I saw, I thought he was extremely likeable.
Yeah. And here he is, he's patting some guide dogs to the blind. I found this interview the other day where he moaned about the fact he bought his children dogs. He bought a dog, it's a Labrador.
Yeah.
Who's whinging about the fact he had to go and buy all these pet toys for a dog that he didn't even want.
But see, that's real, that's normal. I quite like that.
Yeah,
Don't polish it for us all the time.
Exactly, and because, of course, we are a nation of dog lovers, so it's quite brave to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address.
And we are going to be talking, of course, about the outrageous behaviour of this Just Stop Oil protesters, demonstrating and disrupting, and I think actually ruining the Les Mis for people in London this week. Absolutely appalling.
It is. It's awful. Don't go anywhere. First, though, here's the news with Rhiannon.
Thank you. It's exactly 10:30. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister is set to urge leaders to join forces to tackle illegal migration and protect Europe's borders from criminal gangs. Rishi Sunak's travelling to Spain a day after almost 700 migrants arrived on the Canary Islands in wooden boats. Heads of state and European presidents are meeting in Granada for a summit. He's keen to get illegal migration on the agenda. Downing Street's also expected to announce initiatives to increase intelligence sharing and operational cooperation with Belgium, Bulgaria and Serbia. Rent prices for homes have increased to the highest level on record. The average cost of a property, excluding London, is now almost £1,300 a month. In the capital, average rents rose to more than £2,600 per month. The research by Rightmove also shows demand is higher, with properties receiving 25 inquiries a month compared to 8 before the pandemic. And Southern and Thames Water have been identified as standout poor performers by an industry watchdog. The Consumer Council for Water says more than 20 million people were being let down because the firms failed to deal with issues raised by their customers. Complaints to Southern Water were almost 3 times higher than the average for water and sewerage companies. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2125 and 1.1540 euros. The price of gold is £1,501.44 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,416 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Still to come, British Airways' new non-binary uniform goes down as well as aeroplane food.
What does that mean, non-binary?
It means unisex. It means you can both wear it. And it would be like us coming to work, both of us wearing this dress, or both of us wearing your suit.
Ridiculous.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:38. You're with Britain's News and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So just a spoil struck last night. They interrupted a performance of Les Miserables in London. I think we're going to show you some footage. But first of all, let's introduce our guest. Carol Malone is here, broadcasting journalist and political consultant Emma Burnell. Morning, ladies.
Morning.
This is just infuriating, Carol, isn't it, when you see these idiots disrupting an evening like this?
Well, it could be, but I've not read the story because it wasn't on the list. But anyway, I kind of briefly looked at it at home. But yeah, I think the great thing about Just Stop Oil now, I know it's hard to say there's anything great about them, but I think the great thing is I think they've given the Tories a bit of a boost. You know, so I think Rishi was able to introduce those policies the way he did and to kind of slow down the race to net zero because of these people, because they're so against it. People want to bring them there.
Which is the great irony, isn't it?
A total irony. You know, he's done them. They have done him a big favour.
But also, you know, the theatre. Emma, it's not cheap going to the theatre, and trust me, because I go a lot, and you're not going to get much change out of £100
playwright.
for a ticket. Well, yeah, as a playwright, you know.
Yeah.
I get what they're trying to do, but they are damaging their arguments the whole time by these sort of guerrilla tactics.
Well, this is the thing. I 100% agree with their intentions. I just don't think their tactics are sensible or the way to persuade people. I mean, there is a slight irony in the fact that Les Mis is actually a play about a revolution.
Yeah. And
they
timed the protest for when they're trying to storm the Bastille.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, you could make the case that this is probably the best play for them to be at. It seems to have been slightly dampened down in terms of how people actually... I don't think most people go, oh, yeah, Les Mis, it's a really revolutionary play. But, as I say, I 100% agree with what they want. I just, as Carol said, I think they might be damaging their cause.
What do you think they could do, though, to make as much impact? We're all talking about it every time they do this.
Well, this is the thing. We're talking about them rather than about climate change.
Right.
And that, for me, you know, what we should be talking about is how to transition away from fossil fuels, how to make sure that we have the energy infrastructure that we really need in this country, how to have the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And instead, we're talking about this group and their tactics. And I don't know that that's persuading more people to come on board with the kind of things we need.
And you think during the lockdown, Carol, that theatres were shut? And they got very little support from the government.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle. And now this theatre's had to refund all the money to the people who are going because they cancelled the production.
And that's why the antipathy towards them grows every single day. You know, Emma's right. You know, everyone wants us to get to net zero. I don't think there's a person on the planet that doesn't want us to get there. But what we want to do is at a pace that doesn't wreck the country while we're doing it. And that's what kind of Rishi said. And that's why so many people are kind of on his side over this. He said, you know, we do want to get there, but we want to make sure that before we chuck out the oil and we chuck out fossil fuels, we've got something in place to replace it. I mean, these guys would have the country brought to a standstill. They'd have the country in the dark.
Yeah.
That can't work. And sensible people know that.
They're all kids in their 20s, of course. Who have not really lived a life, have they?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They are young and enthusiastic and inexperienced and idealistic and probably terribly nice and sweet. It's just whether their tactics are working or not, and that's
I don't know
the
if
question.
they're terribly nice and sweet, Emma. You know, you don't go trying to damage works of art, and you don't go trying to disrupt an entire city and stop people getting to hospital if you're nice and sweet. I wouldn't describe them as that. I think they're zealots and
fanatics.
And you know, I'm trying to think if I was their age whether I'd be doing that. You know, I was marching on things. I marched for causes. However, I think this has gone too far now. I really do. You can make a protest.
What did you march for?
I'm in C&D, everything. I did.
Were you really?
Well, I was in Newcastle University.
Do you know someone?
You weren't with those women at Greenham Common, were you?
No, but I agreed with them. I did agree with them.
This is a revelation.
Listen, when you're
Hold
20,
the front page.
when you're 20, of course you do.
I didn't agree with the Greenham Common women. I'm the same.
I went to Greenham Common. It was fantastic. I was 8 years old. I got taken by my mum. It was just an absolute foundational experience.
Did you stay there?
We stayed one night, so we weren't there permanently.
You were in a tent.
But we were in a tent, and we went and marched around the base.
Yeah. Did you see Carol Malone there?
I don't remember Carol there.
I think I'm a lot older than you, so...
I can't believe you...
And this was just for people who were watching who'd be too young to know what we're talking about. This was about nuclear disarmament.
They were bringing American nuclear missiles onto British soil.
Onto a British base.
Women staged a big protest, and they were there for a couple of years. And it was a very anti-Mrs Thatcher, wasn't it, the whole thing?
And remember, I lived in the shadow of Newcastle University, and I didn't go myself, but I had pals there. So any march that was on, I'd go for it.
Oh, look, we got a little bit of footage of Greenham Common.
Not very clean, Malone. You would never have stayed
there,
would you? You would never have stayed. Emma is a true rebel here. I can see that. But
my mum was the true rebel. She's the one who took me.
It was near Newbury.
Right, OK, so Berkshire.
Yeah, Berkshire. Wasn't it near Newbury, somewhere like that?
I can't remember.
And I remember going to it as a reporter and being appalled by the smell.
Well,
I'm sorry, it smelled.
What did it smell of?
People not having wash.
Revolution.
Yeah,
well, they built a revolutionary
facilities. This was not a campsite.
Yeah, revolutionary smell, as they probably did as they were storming the Bastille in Victor Hugo's very fine book.
Probably no worse than your socks after 2 days' pay.
Look at this. So one of these people could be Carol Malone that we're looking at.
Is Carol Malone there?
I would have...
Look, there's Carol in a...
I'd be wearing nice clothes.
Is that you, Carol, with that stupid hat on? Look, they were all on drugs, weren't they?
I'd be wearing
all on cannabis. They're all on cannabis. All on cannabis? No, you're too young.
We can't speculate.
What about your mum? What about your mum? Was she on any cannabis?
Speak for mum.
Right.
You could probably get high from the smell of it.
Yeah.
All right, so from something, Phil, 40, 50 years ago to something yesterday.
40 years
Rishi Sunak's speech.
Yes.
Right, Carol, what did you make of it? Were you grips?
To be fair, he's never going to have that kind of oomph in making a speech that someone like Priti Patel has. I mean, I thought that speech, never mind whether you agree with what she says, it was mesmerising. You couldn't take your eyes off her. He hasn't got that. However, all of that said, he still looked a bit nerdy. He still sounded a little bit weedy at times. However, if you dig down into a lot of the content, a lot of what he said, I thought it was very important. And I think it also was the kind of speech that people who, for the past year, have wanted to vote Tory and have said to themselves, I cannot vote for them currently the way they are.
So what are they doing?
I think that would give them permission to vote Tory at the next election because he looked steady, he looked stable. He's got it. I think cancelling HS2 was a smart, brave move.
Yeah.
He knew he was going to come in for opposition. I think getting his wife to open that was super smart.
Did she not speak for too long?
No, I thought
I think she did.
One, because we never expected her to be there. I wanted to hear every word she said.
Right.
Two, I thought it was heartfelt. I mean, it didn't seem like staged to me. I mean, I'm not sure I believe the bit where she said, he doesn't know what I'm going to say. I'm pretty sure he did.
Yeah.
But,
I bet he did.
but I thought it was heartfelt, and she was speaking, I think Amanda Patel said it in the paper this morning, she said she was speaking not like some dutiful, silly wife. She was speaking about a man that she's proud of, and I thought it was really good. But I mean, back to his speech, I thought his stuff on immigration and his experience of this country was really moving. I thought it was incredibly moving. I thought when he talked about his granddad going to Westminster Hall with him and making a phone call, and he said, "You can't do that, Granddad." And he said, "No," and he was ringing his very first landlady, his father, for when he first came to this country, to tell her where he was with his son. So, and that, to me, is a story of, like, hope. And he said after that, "Don't ever let anyone tell you this country is racist. You can come here with very little, and you can end up in Downing Street." And I thought that was really moving.
He also said on that point, didn't he? He said, "I'm proud to be the first Asian Prime Minister, Emma," but he also said, "But it's no big deal." Which I think is a very interesting observation.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think it's been really interesting that we have had a number of ethnic minority leaders, politicians, chancellors, and it just doesn't seem to be, you know, commentable almost now. You know, this is just normal. This is what Britain looks like, and that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, the Labour Party, Emma, sadly, but anyway.
Well, yeah, the Labour Party have a few issues on that. We've never had a woman leader. We haven't had an ethnic minority leader. We might well have the first female chancellor if they win the next election, so that would be amazing. But, yeah, there are... But, yeah, as I say, the point is that we just don't think of this as a big deal, which is great, because we've come so far. You know, we were just talking about the 80s, and I remember some really, really nasty incidents.
What about his assertion, which has got him into hot water with some people, a man's a man, a woman's a woman? I was punching the air when he said that. Good for him. Because he's been attacked by the usual lot.
I know, but isn't that a crazy thing to have to say? That someone can be attacked for saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman.
I welcome him saying it.
I mean, I'm gender critical, as I think we've discussed before. I don't believe in the concept of gender. I think it's a social construct that puts people into boxes that they don't necessarily belong in. Do I wish this debate would go away? A little bit, yeah. It just seems so high up the agenda now, and even someone like me, who has been really passionate about it, is just getting a little kind of... Can we talk about the economy? Can we talk about the cost of living? Can we talk about...
But they're going to talk about this because Labour, Keir Starmer said, when he was asked the question, can a woman have a cervix? Can only a woman have a cervix? He said it's not a straightforward
Well,
question.
Labour have come a long way in the last year on this issue, and their National Policy Forum has basically reinforced sex-based rights, which is exactly
what's
what I want
happened, Emma, is
to do.
they've been told not to talk like that anymore. They've been told not to obfuscate in that way anymore, because he did it, Rachel Reeves did it, the pair of them wrapped themselves up in knots about saying what is a man and what is a woman.
They got themselves into a lot of trouble, and they've got themselves back into a more sensible position.
But I don't think people will forget that this had to be clarified. Why did it have to be clarified? That should be an instinctive answer. Is a man, a woman, a woman? That should be an instinctive thing, in my view.
I mean, I think there are two instincts that are coming up against each other here. There is the biological reality that we all grow up knowing, and there is the instinct of kindness. And there are a certain number of people who don't identify with the gender that matches the sex that they're born into, and they need to be treated with compassion, and, you know, most of the time treated as with respect and in terms of how they want to live their lives.
Completely agree with that, Emma, but how do you explain the attitude of the trans activists who are not kind people?
Well, I agree.
Are incredibly unkind.
What they've said about J.K. Rowling.
It's appalling. And, you know, whenever there's a demonstration and they're shouting to kill TERFs, I mean, that is not kind, you know?
No, but I think there is a very, very noisy minority who behave like that, and then most of us who just want to let people live their lives.
You're the people who should be at the forefront, but sadly you're not. It's those activists who are at the forefront of the whole movement. And I think it's a shame, because I think it stops people who don't know or understand about transgenderism. I think it stops them wanting to understand when they see those activists out in force, which is a shame.
Well, I think I probably agree with you. I think it's similar to the Just Stop Oil thing. I would like to see a better debate about sex-based rights and where those sometimes come up against trans rights, and how we have that sensible discussion is really important. But the visibility of the way that this discussion happens, and I've been on the receiving end of it myself, it makes it so hard to have that, because it's terrifying, frankly.
Yeah. It is.
I think about the abuse Rosie Duffield on the Labour benches has had for taking us.
Well, Rosie's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, when she's had a terrible time.
She has.
From her own colleagues.
From some of her own colleagues. She's also had a lot of support from other... So I went to university in Canterbury, so first time I ever voted was in 1997 in Canterbury.
Did you see Andrew Boff from the London Assembly, Carol, being escorted out from the speech for a little bit of heckling over the gender ideology?
I mean, that looked a bit... He muttered something.
It was a bit heavy-handed, wasn't it?
It's not good. Wasn't he allowed back in, though? I mean, wasn't he brought immediately back in?
Yes,
it was an overreaction. It was an overreaction. The Swallow was quite right to do that. But I suppose what they did was they didn't know how far it was going to go, maybe. Maybe they didn't know whether there was going to be more.
We've got the pictures on screen.
Andrew doesn't look like your average Tory activist, because normally they're suited and booted. He's been a member of the London Assembly for about 15 years, and he's been a Tory party member for 50 years. He's the most unlikely heckler, and of course he's rather enjoying it. But what were the police doing with him?
You see, what he said was there's no such thing as gender ideology. What did he mean by that, Emma?
I think one of the questions that comes up is this an ideology? Is it a belief system that is based in, basically, ideological points of view rather than, treating people more medically? That is one of the big contentions.
So he was effectively saying this debate is being weaponised into an ideology which is trying to change people's opinions via a sort of propagandist means. And he's saying it's not that. This is just individuals who want to live a certain way. Whereas I would say it's the trans activists who are making it.
Completely.
Absolutely made it into...
Yeah, it is. And they are demanding that we believe what they believe. And, you know, there has to be a choice. Whether you believe it or not. To me, it is an ideology, and if I don't choose to believe it, I don't expect to be castigated or cancelled because of that. And that, I'm afraid, is what is happening to people in positions of power.
So the uniform of the air steward, air hostess, air host...
We can't call them trolley dollies anymore.
Can't call them trolley dollies.
I think of all the things you can't call them trolley dollies, probably the main one.
I'm probably going to get into a lot of trouble on social media. I've said it.
Either that or the next time you go on a plane, you're going to get a drink thrown in.
Exactly.
So British Airways have introduced a gender-neutral uniform. Here it is. We're looking at it on screen. If you're listening on the radio, it's basically polo shirts. So a dark blue polo shirt with a little red trim on the sleeve. And then for the men, it appears to be... Is that trousers he's wearing? I can't really see. He looks like he's wearing a skirt.
No, he's got a skirt.
He looks like he's got shirts.
Is he wearing a skirt?
He's got a skirt.
OK. So there is an option. Oh, my word. Yeah. So there's an option for the men that involves a skirt and a sort of blue and red cravat. There's clearly a suit in the middle. I presume that... No, I don't...
What is the point of this?
So the whole point is, I guess, that they are much more aligned in terms of uniform. It's going to be a cost-saving issue, isn't it, Emma, this?
Probably. Look, I don't care if men want to wear skirts. Why shouldn't they? If you want to wear a skirt, wear a skirt.
Care.
If you want to wear a trouser, wear a trouser. But I am a woman.
British Airways... No, but British Airways women care.
But why do they care? I mean, it doesn't make any difference to that individual. As I say...
they're saying it does.
Sex-based rights is one thing, but telling people what they should and shouldn't wear... it's just, again, that for me is about enforcing gender stereotypes rather than smashing them.
Lots of air companies have uniforms. If you don't want to wear the uniform of that company, don't go work for them. That is their rules. And what the women in this company are saying, that they're saying that these are androgynous uniforms and they're being made to cater for non-binary colleagues. And the women, what the women want to wear is being ignored. So, you know, if non-binary people have rights, why shouldn't women have rights?
I mean, you've just said it. If you go to work for a company, you wear the uniform they give you.
But they're making the uniform to cater for a very small section of the workforce.
I mean, it looked to me like there were two different options. I believe there's a trouser option and a skirt option, so people can wear what they want to wear.
There's also a modern jumpsuit.
I mean, the bigger problem for me is the fact that it's all polyester.
Yeah, well, this is what the women are complaining about.
Completely right. Yes. And I was on an EasyJet recently, and I said to the guy, Yes, is that suit hot? He said, you can't know how uncomfortable this is. Yeah. It's really cheap.
Because it's polyester.
There's a skirt and trouser.
Oh, it's horrible to wear.
Skirts and trouser options for women, a tailored three-piece suit for men, and a modern jumpsuit which anyone can wear. And going to the loo in an aeroplane in a modern jumpsuit, that would be a nightmare.
Are they polyester suits? Because this is not going to please Emma.
Yeah, well, they're not. Oh, look, it looks very nice. I like the modern. It's lovely. Jumpsuit tied in at the waist.
Ridiculous.
Well, and I hate jumpsuits because I'm of a size that they just do not look good on me. I just look terrible.
But you do look fabulous in polyester, Carol.
I do, yes.
OK, thanks, ladies. Right, coming up, we're going to go live to the sentencing of Jaswant Singh Chahal, who was found guilty of treason after being found with a crossbow, if you remember, in the grounds of Windsor.
Hello there. Very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Definitely a mixed picture across the UK during today. We've already got rain spreading into parts of Northern Ireland, really quite a wet, damp start to the day here. That is pushing its way into western parts of Scotland and then will eventually reach parts of northern England and Wales as well. But southeastern areas of England and even the far northeast of Scotland in the Northern Isles staying largely dry for most of the day with some sunny spells as well. Will be southeastern England that sees those higher temperatures though, generally reaching around 19 degrees Celsius. A bit cooler where you are stuck underneath the rain and particularly for northeast Scotland. Around 12 degrees Celsius there. Quite gusty at times, some gales around the Irish Sea coastal areas. That rain though will spread its way eastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Eventually a few drabs pushing their way across southeastern areas as well. But most places largely turning dry as we head into the second half of the night. Still just some random showers pushing their way through at times. A lot of cloud around though and still the breeze in place, so that will help mix up the air and prevent our temperatures dropping too far at all. Most of us seeing quite a mild night around 14-15 degrees Celsius. We then see this lingering rain start to push its way into parts of Scotland throughout Friday. This pulse as it heads in later on in the afternoon as well could provide some quite heavy and persistent rain, so worth watching out for that. But again, a fairly fine dry start and end to the day across southern areas with some sunny spells in there as well. Temperatures beginning to climb with that southerly airflow around 21 degrees Celsius, even higher as we head into the weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Well, after the break, we're going to be asking the Tory MP, Philip Davison, a great person here on GB News, if Rishi Sunak is beginning to look and sound like a Tory.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, 11 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of October. Britain's Newsroom here on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Well, it's finally happened.
I am ending this long-running saga. I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
That's the Prime Minister saying goodbye to HS2, and he's unveiled £36 billion worth of Network North transport projects to replace that line between Manchester and Birmingham, which is now not going to happen.
A smokeless generation. Rishi Sunak has said that increasing the legal smoking age annually will be the single biggest intervention in public health in a generation.
And just stop all, they've done it again. This time, they brought a performance of Les Miserables at the Sondheim Theatre in London to a halt. 5 people arrested. Protesters were not warmly welcomed by the audience, to say the least.
Monty Python, that reaction.
You naughty people. Very naughty.
And record high rents. The average rent outside of London has risen to almost £1,300 a month.
Very naughty.
I'm not laughing at the rent.
The newspaper's going to track that woman down. Very naughty people and ask her, did she watch Life of Brian? Very naughty.
Yeah, the Rentsaw story is awful. I'm sorry I was laughing through that. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. First, though, here's Rhiannon with your news.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister will tell leaders they need to join forces to protect Europe's borders from criminal gangs. Rishi Sunak's travelling to Spain for a summit a day after almost 700 migrants arrived on the Canary Islands in wooden boats. On the sidelines of the main meeting, he'll co-chair talks with the Italian Prime Minister on the rising levels of illegal migration. Downing Street's also expected to announce initiatives to increase intelligence sharing with Belgium, Bulgaria and Serbia. Rent prices for homes have increased to the highest level on record. The average charge for a property excluding London is now almost £1,300 a month. It's the 15th consecutive quarter that the record's been broken. In the capital, average rents rose to more than £2,600 per month. The research by Rightmove also shows demand is higher, with properties receiving 25 inquiries compared to 8 before the pandemic. Property expert Russell Quirk says the rise was inevitable.
Supply, so the amount of rental properties available, has also dropped. So the numbers state that there's about 35% fewer properties available. So you've got demand up, supply down. There's only one inevitable consequence of that, which is that prices will increase significantly, as indeed they are.
The Transport Secretary says cancelling HS2 will allow investments that fit the needs of the country. It's after the Prime Minister announced the northern leg of the high-speed rail line has been scrapped. Former Prime Ministers Boris Johnson and David Cameron both criticised the decision, saying that a once-in-a-generation opportunity has been lost. Mark Harper told GB News the facts have changed.
Every penny that we save from cancelling that's £36 billion, and reinvesting every penny across the north, the Midlands and the rest of the country on important transport infrastructure that the people of this country want. So I think that's just changing what we're investing, still investing in transport, but having investments that fit the needs of the country and recognise the facts have changed about the costs of HS2.
A man who broke into Windsor Castle with a loaded crossbow to kill the late Queen is due to be sentenced for treason. Jasvant Singh Chale was found on the grounds on Christmas Day in 2021 while Queen Elizabeth was in residence. Prosecutors told the Old Bailey Chale was encouraged to kill by an artificial intelligence girlfriend. The maximum sentence for treason is 7 years. The Scottish Government signed an extradition order for a man accused of faking his own death to avoid prosecution. Nicholas Rossi is wanted in the US for allegedly raping a woman in 2008. He was arrested in Glasgow in 2021, but claimed it was a case of mistaken identity and that he's an Irish orphan called Arthur Knight. After a long legal battle, he'll now be transported to the States to face the charges against him. 3,000 people have been evacuated from Tenerife after wildfires reignited in the north of the island. Over the summer, nearly 40,000 acres of woodland were burnt, forcing thousands of tourists to be evacuated from the area. Hot weather and strong winds caused the fire to restart yesterday. Temperatures are expected to reach close to 40 degrees in the coming days. And Southern and Thames Water have been identified as standout poor performers by an industry watchdog. The Consumer Council for Water says more than 20 million people were being let down because the firms failed to deal with issues raised by their customers. Complaints to Southern Water were almost 3 times higher than the average for water and sewage companies. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car and digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Andrew and Bev.
Those blooming water companies are outrageous.
Awful.
And they're now
It's a
telling
disaster.
us that our water bills are going to go up about £150 extra next year so they can invest in improving the service, improving sewage. That should be coming out of the dividends they gave to shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been horribly let down, I think, in our water supplies.
Now, the Prime Minister, he announced a lot of policies yesterday, including a smoking ban, scrapping of A-levels, getting rid of the HS2 Northern Link, but he didn't talk much about the cost of living crisis or inflation, debt, waiting lists. Did he even mention migrants?
No, I don't think he did he? Well, they are, of course, his 5 key priorities. He also said that people are right to be exhausted with the politicians who are all talk and no action. There was plenty of talk in his party conference speech, of course, but do voters think that he is a man of action? Let's have a quick listen for that.
That Westminster is a broken system, and the same goes for Holyrood, Cardiff Bay and Stormont. It isn't anger. It's an exhaustion with politics. In particular, politicians saying things and then nothing ever changing.
So, every time I keep listening, can you hear it? I'm thinking more and more as the 24 hours has gone on of what he didn't say, actually. He did leave a lot of the immigration to Suella Braverman, of course.
But the cost of living crisis is the biggest single issue facing people watching this programme, listening to this programme, and he didn't talk about it really, did he?
No.
Philip Davis is joining us now. Of course, you know who he is. He's not only the Tory MP, he's the GB News presenter on Saturday mornings. Philip, I saw you at the conference. I don't know if you tore yourself away from the excitement of the final day, the speech, but what did you make of it?
I thought it was a really good speech.
I did.
And look, I mean, I take Bev's point that, you know, there's lots of things he didn't cover, but people were saying it was a really long speech. If he'd covered everything in his speech, it probably would still be going on now. So, I mean, you can't talk about everything. I thought it was a very good speech. And obviously the big announcement was scrapping HS2 and reinvesting that money on transport systems across the north, which is what us in the north have been wanting to see for ages. So on that basis, it was an excellent speech.
Did he sound like... Is he starting to sound, Philip, more and more like a Tory? Because that's been quite a lot of the criticism of Rishi, that he sounds more like a technocrat, a money man. But was this Rishi finally showing his true blue Tory colours?
Yeah, I don't think it's him starting to sound like a Tory. As far as I'm concerned, he always has been. I mean, he's certainly far more conservative than Boris Johnson ever was despite the image that Boris used to try and portray. So, but I think what he's done is come out fighting, I think, a bit more over the last 2 or 3 weeks with the net zero announcement, the HS2 announcement. He sort of had his Weetabix, really, and I think that the people like to see this new sort of assertive Prime Minister. I think he likes to get under the bonnet of things. He likes to look at the detail, but now he's sort of made some decisions after doing that. I think people like this new sort of assertive Rishi. It's going down well.
It's really interesting to see how the papers have handled it this morning, Philip, because obviously the right-wing press are talking about the fact that he's making changes. It's a radical new image for the Conservative Party, new image for the vision for the future. The Guardian have picked up on the fact that they say his speech has caused division and ignites a Tory civil war after declaring that he's a change candidate. Did you see it like that? It wasn't an entirely united Conservative Party over the last few days.
Well, I mean, the Conservative Party is a broad church. If you look hard enough, you're always going to find somebody who's going to criticise the leader. That was the case when Mrs Thatcher was Prime Minister. It didn't mean that the Conservative Party was disunited. It just meant that you had the odd person who didn't really agree with that particular journey and the way that the party was going. But I don't think the party's disunited at all, to be honest. I think the party's united behind Rishi. I think they were egging him on, we're cheering him on, we're hoping he does well. So, no, I didn't see it like that. And of course, he's a change candidate. He's a new Prime Minister. He has different opinions to Liz Truss. He has different opinions to Boris Johnson. So, of course, whenever you get a new Prime Minister, it's a change. Just as when John Major took over from Margaret Thatcher, nobody doubted that was a change, and the same applies now.
What about tax, Philip? You know, you don't need me to tell you, and people watching and listening know too well how the tax burden is the greatest since the Second World War. He didn't talk about tax at all. Extraordinary. A Tory Prime Minister in his party conference speech, almost certainly the last one before the general election, not mentioning tax or even an aspiration to cut it.
Well, I think he has. He didn't mention it in that speech, but he has made it clear that he thinks that the tax burden's too high. He wants to bring it down, but he wants to do so in a responsible way when inflation's been brought down. Look, taxes are too high in this country. They're far too high. It's the highest burden of taxation that we've ever had in this country, and that's a legacy of Boris Johnson. That's what happened under Boris. We've got to get them down. But of course, look, I think what we need in order to get, we can't just sort of say we need to get taxes down. We need an honest conversation in this country about what the role of the state is. Because until we start accepting that the state can't do everything and the state's got to have a much more limited role in the country, we're never going to get taxes down. So saying we need to get taxes down actually is actually the country having to have a discussion about what the government and the state should do and what it should leave to people to do for themselves. And that's the much bigger issue that's at stake here.
Which actually, Philip, leads us on nicely to the issue of smoking cessation and whether the state should be allowed to tell perfectly autonomous adults that they can't smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, look, I disagree with that. Rishi said it was going to be a free vote in Parliament. As both of you will know, I've always thought every vote's a free vote in Parliament, to be perfectly honest. But this is officially a free vote in Parliament. I will not be voting with the government on this issue. I can't justify that policy. People should be free to make up their own minds. They should be free to spend their own money as they wish. It shouldn't be for the government to nanny state them in this way. So I will absolutely be voting against the government when that motion comes before the House. But no doubt every Labour MP will vote with the government. So I don't think there's much chance of my side of the argument winning.
I wonder, though, Philip, how many people will take your view? Because, like you, I'm not a banner instinctively. I can't bear the idea of people keep banning things. But if a lot of MPs take your view, this might not get through.
Oh, it'll definitely get through. It will definitely get through. There might be a few, a few people will abstain and make themselves absent that day for that vote. But there'll be a hard core of us who freedom fighters who'll vote against the government. But it will be. It's like Madame Tussauds, Andrew. It's the same faces in there all the time when you vote against the government on these issues.
Yeah, it's true. Now, I wonder if you've discussed this issue with a certain MP called Esther McVeigh. What will she do? I know she can speak for herself, but have you discussed it with her?
Exactly. I was just about to say, Andrew, she's perfectly capable of speaking for herself. I learnt a long time ago not to ever try and speak for Esther McVeigh.
But talking of wives then, let's be a little kinder to you. Talking of wives, Akshata Murthy, Rishi Sunak's wife, obviously introduced him onto the stage yesterday. This has divided people. I think it was incredibly saccharine. And if Esther McVeigh was going to get on stage and introduce you, would she be quite so sycophantic about the fact that you're amazing and you have no faults?
She certainly would not. Absolutely not. No, she'd be struggling to find something good to say about me, I think, to be honest.
But isn't that what most, in all honesty, most married couples are like that? So she sort of lost me with the whole idea that everything's perfect. It seemed insincere.
Look, Akshata is a lovely, lovely person, and she's certainly a huge asset for Rishi, but also, for the Conservative Party. And I think it was great that she obviously said what she wanted to say. It's not for me to tell her what she should say or shouldn't have said. She said what she wanted to say, and I thought it was a nice break in between the political speeches. So I say more power to her elbow, but I can say Akshata is a very, very lovely person.
Well, she was one of the unexpected stars of the week, wasn't she? The other unexpected star of the week, Philip, was Nigel Farage. At his first Tory conference, he told me, since 1987. He was mobbed wherever he went. When he came onto the GB News platform, the queue of people to see him afterwards was enormous. Rishi Sunak said he would not mind if he came back to the Tory party. What do you think? Get him back into the Tory party?
Oh, yeah, I'd love Nigel Farage to be back in the Conservative Party. That's where he belongs. Nigel's a true Conservative in every sense. And, part of our measure of success as a party should be, can we get people like Nigel Farage and people who agree with him back supporting the Conservative Party? Surely any Conservative Party should be looking to get the support of people like Nigel Farage. I'd love him to be back in the party. And to be honest, if he got back in the party and he got a seat in Parliament and stood for the leadership, I think the bookies would have him as the favourite to win that contest. So, you saw that at the conference. Nigel's a massively popular politician and massively effective politician, and the Conservative Party needs people of his talent.
You'd vote for him if he was back in Parliament and there was a leadership election, Philip. Would he have your vote?
Andrew, you're a very naughty boy. And that, just like that lady said in the theatre the other night, you're a very naughty boy. We have got a very good leader of the Conservative Party, and whilst ever Rishi Sunak is leader of the Conservative Party, I will support him.
All right, that's Philip Davies being unusually diplomatic. Philip Davies, of course, is with Esther every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Right, later today, Jaswant Singh Chahal will be sentenced for treason following a guilty plea after being found with a crossbow in the grounds of Windsor Castle on Christmas Day in 2021. Do you remember that? Wow. It's the first person to be convicted of treason since 1981. He also admitted making threats to kill and possessing a loaded weapon.
We're going to talk now to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's live outside the Old Bailey. Cameron, we haven't had treason since 1981. That's when a teenager, I'm old enough to remember it, fired blanks at the Queen when she was on her horse, trooping the colour. It was a remarkable thing because everybody was startled and shocked and thought she, of course, didn't turn her hair. She was unruffled. So this is only the second treason conviction in 40 years.
Yeah, the Queen's horse, the beloved Burmese, was a little bit startled, but as you said, the Queen controlled her horse. That was a Marcus Sargent who was sentenced to 5 years in prison under the Treason Act of 1842. And Jaswant Singh Chahal, later on today, will become the first person since the 1980s to be sentenced even, of the same crime. Just picture the scene. It's Christmas Day 2021, early in the morning. The late Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, and her close family members are just beginning to enjoy festivities when a 19-year-old man scales the outer perimeter fence of Windsor Castle using a nylon rope ladder, armed with a loaded crossbow capable of firing lethal force at its targets. Now, the safety catch was off, and Chahal spent 2 hours inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, close to the Queen's private apartment, before being apprehended and challenged by police officers. Now, Chahal told police officers that he is here to kill the Queen. Now, he was arrested and subsequently charged with 3 separate offences. The first, the most serious, the treason under the Treason Act, Section 2 of the Treason Act 1842, intent to injure or alarm the sovereign, also making threats to kill, and possession of an offensive weapon in a public place. Now, a couple of hours before he entered the grounds of Windsor Castle, he posted a video on WhatsApp to family and friends where he spoke of his intention to try and assassinate Queen Elizabeth II. He wore dark clothes and a metal face mask. He said it was revenge for the 1919 Amritsar massacre, where British troops opened fire on thousands of Indians. He also said he was sorry for what he was about to do. Now, police found a note written by Chile, which has been released in the last 24 hours or so. It says, "Please don't remove my clothes, shoes, gloves, mask, etc. Don't want post-mortem, don't want embalming. Thank you, and I'm sorry." Well, during sentencing hearing, a Dr. Christian Brown, who was a psychiatrist treating Chile at Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital in London, told the court that Chile thought he was in a relationship with an artificial intelligence girlfriend, a chatbot, an avatar named Sarai. Now, the court also was told that Chile was a Star Wars fanatic and identified as a Sith, which is a villainous character in the Star Wars franchise, and he exchanged 5,000 messages with this AI girlfriend. A number of them were sexually explicit, but he said that he wanted to be united with her in the afterlife, and the psychiatrist said that it was part of his plans of working towards his own death. Now, the chatbot both discouraged and encouraged Chile to carry out his crimes. That is what the court heard. The prosecuting barrister said that the crimes were so serious that this has to attract a maximum possible sentence. The maximum possible sentence for treason 1842, the Treason Act 1842, is 7 years in prison. The prosecuting barrister also said that if Chile had raised his weapon at Queen Elizabeth II, then that would be high treason and a life sentence. Now, Chile is going to be sentenced later today at the Old Bailey, but 2 questions remain really for me. First of which is, how was it that a would-be assassin was allowed to wander around the grounds of Windsor Castle for 2 hours before being apprehended by police? And also, how was it that an artificial intelligence chatbot could encourage someone to commit or try to commit what would have been the crime of the century?
Absolutely fascinating. Brilliant job, Cameron Walker. Thank you. We were gripped listening to that. Absolutely. I mean, it's just the most remarkable case, isn't it?
And the idea that, as Cameron said, he was able to wander around the grounds of Windsor Castle for 2 hours. It should be the most secure building in the country. But Her Majesty the Queen was there, the entire royal family there for Christmas.
Absolutely. So if you're thinking, what does that mean, an AI chatbot girlfriend? It basically means somebody, not human, artificial intelligence entity online, emulating normal human conversation. It's so difficult to explain when you start talking about these crazy ideas, and therefore has persuaded him to commit the crime, the robot using AI, and also dissuaded him from committing the crime. But this, when people say that AI might be the demise of humanity, what happens in that situation if the AI robot had literally encouraged him and incited him to that crime? Does the AI robot end up in the court? Do you see, you go into we're living in the realms of insanity, aren't we?
We really are. It's
fascinating.
And extraordinary as well. Imagine if he'd got to the Queen.
Absolutely.
It was a lethal weapon.
Yeah.
Never forget, of course, the Queen, Michael Fagan, broke into her bedroom.
The one found sat on her bed.
Sat on her bed. And they realised there was something up when she sent out for cigarettes at 7:15 in the morning, and the butler thought, or the editor thought, Her Majesty doesn't smoke.
When you say she sent out for cigarettes, you don't mean like Deliveroo on a mobile?
No. She sent a note to the butler saying, could you send some cigarettes in for me? And so the butler realised there was a problem.
Clever.
And that was Michael Fagan. He got locked up for many years.
She was brilliant, wasn't she?
Lovely.
Right, still to come, rent prices outside of London hit a record high, but are landlords really to blame? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Don't go anywhere.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
26. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We're going to talk to you now about rents, because average advertised rents outside London have reached a record high of £1,300 a month in the last quarter.
So earlier we asked property expert and National Residential Landlords Association representative Richard Blanco why rent is increasing.
There's a huge shortage of rental property. Rightmove points out there's an average of 25 people queuing for each property. Oh. And I've had that experience myself. I've just let a property, actually, in East London, where I advertised it on a Friday. It was let by a Saturday. So it's really, really tough for tenants out there. And the main reason is that landlords are starting to sell up quite substantially. 37% tell us that they're thinking of selling in the next 12 months.
But why is that? Is that because mortgage rates, interest rates have gone up? Is that the big problem?
It is partly because of mortgage rates and making the whole business unaffordable, really. Yeah. But it's really because of the tax changes that George Osborne brought in 2015.
Liam Halligan is with us in the studio, Business and Economics Editor.
He's recovered from the minibus experience.
We might come on to the minibus before the end of the interview, Liam, but this tax issue changed for George Osborne. What was that and why has it affected this now?
It meant that landlords couldn't deduct their interest payments on mortgages on buy-to-let properties against their tax.
So it made it less profitable to buy a flat.
Made it a lot less profitable, and a lot of people bought properties on that basis.
Yeah.
So when they did their sums, they assumed that tax deduction, and when it was taken away, it made a lot of.
But what was the logic behind that?
Because because the Treasury convinced the Chancellor that if you take away the tax deduction, then they'll get more revenue.
Well, there was a lot of people at the time, weren't there? That was a time when buying a property and renting it out, people were doing that as an alternative to a pension, and there were people buying up a lot.
And it makes sense, because, do you know, if I said to you, in the last 20 years, what's actually happened to the FTSE 100, right? It's gone up and down. It's basically been flat, right? So you've got almost no return, unlike in the US stock market. And that's why lots of people have ended up as accidental landlords. They've moved on up the housing ladder as their family have expanded. They've maybe, kept a property and remortgaged using lower interest rates in order to buy the bigger place. And so they've ended up with one or two properties.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kind of, amateur landlords, they found the property game too tough. The tax advantages aren't there. There's more red tape, more rigmarole, more aggro, and so they just don't want to rent their properties anymore. They want to sell them. And that's what's driving these higher prices. So let's have a quick look at them. I know you mentioned them earlier, but just to reiterate, so the average UK rent is now £1,278 a month.
That, Liam? Would that be a 1 or 2 bedroom flat?
Well, it depends. Yeah, it's not specific, because it's the average property, and that's 10% higher than this time last year, which is obviously very considerable. But
10%.
But check out London. The average rent in London is £2,672 a month, and that's 12% up on 2022. So that's the rent rises. But then, as we also heard there from the National Residential Landlords Association, it's also a question of home search, how many people want each property. And the average rental property, according to Rightmove, is attracting 25 inquiries. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily visits. That might be email inquiries or phone inquiries, but it still shows that demand is very, very strong and there's a shortage of properties. That's up on 8 inquiries only this time last year for each property. The hottest rental market, where do you think it is? Which city? Which town?
Brighton.
It's Luton.
Really? Why?
Yep, Luton, which is just 30-odd miles north of London. I'd say it's partly Luton's obviously well known. It has a very strong and proud ethnic minority community. So we've had quite a lot of immigration from the Indian subcontinent. So I imagine a lot of people there will be joining up with their friends and relatives in Luton, but also other towns and cities where rents are more than 20% up over the last year: Loughborough, Preston, Edinburgh, and Paisley. So this isn't just a London and the South East thing at all. It isn't just an England thing at all. Rents are highest in London, which isn't surprising, but rents are going up fastest outside of London.
Why Paisley in Scotland?
Because it's quite near Edinburgh, and I imagine it's near both the big major cities, obviously, and it's obviously a smaller place, maybe a nicer place to live for a lifestyle. Transport links.
Preston is an interesting one.
Preston in the northwest.
So what, about half an hour's drive from Manchester, 40 minutes, not dissimilar to Liverpool from there.
And I guess also if you don't want to live in the big city, but you may work in
and you probably get more for your money in Preston than you would near Manchester.
And actually quite well connected with the train line.
It's quite well connected with the train. Universities around there, of course. Some of this might be students. So it's interesting. It's not just about the level of rent. It's also about the rate of change of rent. But look, being no doubt, at the Tory party conference, I spoke at various fringe meetings on housing, because it's sort of one of the issues I specialise in. And it was just such a big topic, not just the number of homes we're building to buy, but rentals. And one reason I think there were so many young people at Conservative Party conference is because they were attending these housing fringes. They were trying to lobby and inject the idea that we are young people, we need somewhere to live, we have to build more homes.
And yet the Prime Minister in his speech, Liam, didn't talk about housing at all.
Which I thought was an enormous miss.
Big gaffe.
As opposed to Liz Truss, who in her sort of evangelical fringe meeting, if you like, which is one of the biggest stories of the conference, right? Hundreds of people were queuing who couldn't get in the room where she was speaking. Housing was a very, very big part of her pitch in order to get growth growing. She said we need to build more homes, and on that, at least, a lot of people would agree.
I think you're absolutely right.
Right, we need to move on. We didn't even get to talk about our minibus drunken ride home yesterday, Liam, but you were a big player in that. You were a terrible influence. Right, still to come, the price of a stamp is now as much as the card inside. You'll never guess how much a first-class stamp now costs. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here is the news first, though, with Rihanna.
Bev, thank you. It's coming up to 11:33. Your top stories in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister will tell leaders they need to join forces to protect Europe's borders from criminal gangs. Rishi Sunak has arrived in Spain, travelling to Granada for a summit. On the sidelines of the main meeting, he'll co-chair talks with the Italian Prime Minister on the rising levels of illegal migration. Downing Street's also expected to announce initiatives to increase intelligence sharing with Belgium, Bulgaria and Serbia. Rent prices for homes have increased to the highest level on record. The average cost for a property, excluding London, is now almost £1,300 a month. In the capital, average rents rose to more than £2,600 per month. The research by Rightmove also shows demand is higher, with properties receiving 25 inquiries compared to 8 before the pandemic. And Southern and Thames Water have been identified as standout poor performers by an industry watchdog. The Consumer Council for Water says more than 20 million people were being let down because the firms failed to deal with issues raised by their customers. Complaints to Southern Water were almost 3 times higher than the average for water and sewerage companies. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2125 and €1.1540 euros. The price of gold is £1,502.40 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,428 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Still to come this morning, did you watch Penny Mordaunt's speech yesterday?
Stand up and fight. Stand up and fight.
Motivating or a little bizarre?
A little bizarre. Britain's Newsroom here on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News. Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Time is now 11:39. I normally get the time wrong at this point, don't I? So it's 10:39 because we're having such a fabulous time. This is Britain's News on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Right, let's have a look what you've been saying at home this morning. Talking about HS2 and Rishi Sunak's announcement that it will be scrapped from Birmingham to Manchester. Trevor says, since when was Manchester or Leeds the north? Well, always. What about Newcastle? Shouldn't it have started here? Same as usual. The real north is forgotten about. I'm hoping...
Manchester's the north, isn't it?
Manchester is the north. But I take your point. Often when we do talk about the north, we do say Manchester, Leeds and Liverpool. So you're quite right, probably, Trevor, to correct us to not forget about Newcastle. Carol Malone would, of course, also support...
Geordie.
The need to, and then on the dangerous dogs issue, Susan has said, I don't agree with dog licensing. The criminal wouldn't bother with them. Also, there's many elderly people who've got dogs for company may not be able to afford a licence.
Well, they used to be 37.5 pence, so it can be cheap. It can be a cheap licence.
And
pensioners should arguably get it free.
Yeah, but in a way,
exactly.
But also, as some people don't drive with insurance on their car, you know, they will dodge it. People who don't want to have it won't do. And then she says, anyone who says that all dogs should be muzzled in public is being ridiculous. That was you, Andrew. She says, maybe you should wear a muzzle to stop you coming out with ridiculous policy.
It's difficult to do.
Did you say that? That is a ridiculous thing to say.
Jack Russells should be muzzled.
No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. Listen, no, they shouldn't. Most dogs, 95% of dogs, do not need a muzzle in public.
Yeah, but what about the 5% who do?
Well, any dog anywhere can bark, can bite someone under the right circumstances if they're scared, if someone
but if they're
hurts
muzzled,
them.
they can't.
Well, no, but you know, you can't. People could say that about all of us. Well, they're right. Whoever said that no, you can't. Dogs are allowed freedoms too.
I'm sure. Emma, just briefly, Emma Burnell is here as well. Emma, what do you think? Should all dogs be muzzled?
No, I don't think so. I find this really complicated. I mean, we seem to be getting more and more anti-dog. There are so many parks and things where you can't take dogs anymore. But at the same time, so many people seem to have got dogs during lockdown.
They did.
I mean, you walk around my area now and it's just absolutely full of dogs. And they're all... poodle mixes. They've all got that very curly hair.
The stat that really stuck with me about these XL bully dogs is that in July of this year, they killed a dog a day. So even though they can't account for a very small number of dogs, they...
I've got a list here. January the 12th, a 28-year-old woman killed in Caterham in Surrey. January the 31st, a 4-year-old girl killed by an XL bully. April the 22nd, 51-year-old man killed. Jonathan Hogg, 37, May, killed by an XL bully. September the 14th, father to Ian Price, mauled to death by 2 XL bullies.
It is a no-brainer.
October the 3rd, Ian Langley.
Yeah. It's a no-brainer.
I think they account for 75% of deaths of people from dog attacks, but they're a tiny percentage of the dogs that we have.
I mean, the difference between an XL bully and my parents' King Charles Spaniel is really quite extraordinary.
But also, these horrible dogs kill other dogs too.
One a day.
It's interesting. I heard a guy say very recently on the radio, he had 2 of them. He said, I did everything right. I was responsible. I went to proper breeders. I trained them. He said, and within a year, I realised that they can do anything they want at any time they want. He said, and I realised that no human can control them.
They're unpredictable.
And that was a responsible.
They're too big and they're too strong.
Right, talking about people with a strong bark and possibly a strong bite. Penny Mordaunt.
Where are you going there?
Yesterday called on her Tory faithful to stand up and fight against Labour. I think we're going to see a little clip of it, aren't we? Let's just watch, if we can, the clip of Penny Mordaunt, because it sort of has to be seen to be believed, really, her tub thumping.
stand up and fight. Because when you stand up and fight, the person beside you stands up and fights. And when our party stands up and fights, the nation stands up and fights. And when our nation stands up and fights, other nations stand up and fight. Have courage. Bring hope. Stand up and fight. Stand up and fight. Thank you, conference.
It's just ridiculous. I don't know. Give a woman a sword once and it goes right to her head.
I know exactly. That is Penny, the Leader of the House of Commons, leadership contender, of course.
I don't know who that is.
No, just people at Boston may know who she is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I thought that was... I know you just said it's tub thumping, but I thought we needed a bit of tub thumping, you know.
I'm not sure who she's fighting, though.
Well, she's talking... The Tories getting together and standing fighting when we all get together, when the nation gets together.
She was trying to do a Mrs Thatcher.
Well, she can, but I thought that kind of... I thought it was strong, it looked assured. I think she sounded...
I think it's a bit embarrassing, Carol.
Did you?
Yeah.
It was,
She just did
when
it
was too
two
much.
or 3 times too many.
When we fight,
no, she
other
did
people
it on
fight.
purpose. The stand and fight was the theme. She had to keep repeating.
But I'm not sure what we're fighting against, Emma. I'm a bit confused.
Like, stand up and fight. What for? Who with? Like, tell us a little bit more about this fight, please.
Stop nitpicking, Emma. You're nitpicking.
Otherwise, we're all sort of sitting at home, kind of drinking a cup of tea and going, I mean, you're trying to get me angry, but I'm sort of angry about you at the moment.
It was quite bizarre. It was interesting because she was introducing Rishi Sunak, wasn't she?
Yeah.
She was the warm-up act.
She didn't think she was the warm-up act.
She thought she was the act.
Yeah, she thought she was the act, and I think she thinks she might be that in a year or so's time.
Yeah.
It is interesting. She has changed in the past year because remember when she was fighting for the leadership, she was stumbling and fumbling all over the place. She's had lessons since then.
Yes, she has.
It looked very rehearsed.
Yeah.
It was very rehearsed, but it was also she's had lessons in the.
But she's a good Commons performer. She's a good speaker.
She is.
She's a good publisher, but I think that one just went off half-cocked. Really.
I don't think she'd be a good PM either, I have to say. I don't think she has the strength
I have
for
a big issue with her because, we're not going to go back into that subject again, but she was the one who famously said in the House of Commons, she talked about pregnant people. The pregnant women.
Yes.
We're not going to get back into that now because we're going to talk about other things. But that caused her a lot of difficulty with Tory MPs.
Yeah.
It really did.
Right, OK, let's move on. Gun cops protecting us from charges or we quit. What's this about, Carol?
Remember a couple of weeks ago, the 300 of the 3,000 gun-carrying cops in London laid down their arms, handed them in because one of their colleagues was charged with murder after Chris Cabba was killed last year, a 24-year-old. So the cops said at the time, they said, we have to have special laws to protect us against this, against being charged with murder every time we discharge a weapon. And now they're saying that they've come back to work now, but now they're saying it's a reprieve, until they get some kind of guarantee, some kind of protection that they will quit. Now, I'm with them 100% on this. It doesn't mean that cops should be allowed to fire whenever they like, how
but they like. Don't anyway,
and they don't, exactly. One person was killed in this country last year by a cop. The year before that, one person by a cop. In America, in the last 3 months, nearly 3,000 people have been killed by cops. So we are not America. They're not trigger-happy cops. But I think they're right. You can't have a national inquiry every time they discharge a weapon. And, we can't talk about the circumstances surrounding Chris Cabba because this man has now been charged with murder, but the facts will come out and there will be a defence as to why this cop did fire when he did. So, yes, there have to be safeguards for the public against cops making mistakes, but, 99% of the time they don't.
Do you think they need a special protection, Emma, or not?
No, I think that they should be under the same laws as the rest of us.
But you don't carry a gun.
I don't carry a gun. I would never carry a gun.
But they have to.
But they have to carry a gun in order to do their job properly. If they use that gun to not do their job properly and to, in fact, kill someone who may have been innocent, then of course there has to be an inquiry into that. Of course it needs to be looked into. These are...
But these are split-second decisions. If there is an inquiry, criminal charge every time, who's going to want to be an armed police officer?
Yes, exactly.
Well, people who don't want to kill people in a split-second decision.
You have to be able to kill people, Emma, if you take that job. And we need those cops on the streets to protect us. They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it to protect us.
Well, it's like you say, we're not America. These are not, likely to happen very often. But when they do, it obviously has to go through a proper process, because that's how you make sure that we have oversight. And they are protecting us, but we have to be aware, who watches the Watchmen and all that. We have to be able to have that policing by consent, and what that means is the policing has oversight.
But you're quite right to say there should be a process, but that process shouldn't automatically start and end with a murder charge. Yes,
well, I don't think it does. I don't think there was anyone charged with murder on other occasions when people have been shot by police. There have been an oversight process through, I think it was through the Independent Police Complaints Commission, rather than there being a criminal charge. So I think for it to get to the level of a criminal charge is extremely rare. And I think that something must have gone wrong there.
My worry is that this man has been charged with murder because of the public outcry at the time and since over this man's shooting. And it would be a terrible thing if cops were charged with murder to placate people who think they should be.
Yeah.
And that is my worry.
Is there too much political correctness creeping in here?
Into the Met Police? No.
They haven't got a great reputation, have they?
Well, no, they don't. And I've been one of the first people to slate them over a lot of the bent cops that are in the Met Police. But on this thing, I'm with them.
Right, David Beckham.
Oh,
fascinating.
That documentary, they've got a new kind of fly on the wall that landed on Netflix, I think, yesterday morning. Have you watched any of it, Emma? Are you deeply interested in the Beckhams?
Not really. I mean, he's a pretty lad. She's a pretty girl. But I find the whole thing... I mean, they've done with their celebrity very, very well for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And good for them, good on them. He's a local lad near where I live. So, another good reason to like him and support him. But they're not the kind of famous I'm particularly interested in.
So, but what have you seen it, Carol? What do you make of any of it?
I've seen clips, OK, and I'm wondering if this whoever's in charge of their PR, and I know who it is because it's the person that's been in charge of their PR for years. This has had more publicity than the Meghan and Harry Netflix documentary. It's incredible. But the thing that's got me this morning is reading this stuff about his OCD, David's OCD. A few years ago, I read a story about how he would wear a pair of trainers once and then throw them away. And I thought, oh, my God.
What a waste.
Yeah.
That's
what a waste.
so wasteful.
Well, he got them for free off Nike or whoever.
But still, it's a terrible
But even
waste.
so, terrible waste. But now they've let us look inside his wardrobes. All his underpants are colour-coded and filled up. All his socks are in a row. It's a bit mad. And you see him in the kitchen scrubbing something like a coffee machine. And he's saying, my wife's not too happy about this. Well, she wouldn't be. It's a bit...
Yeah, it's extreme behaviour.
Yeah,
it's very...
It is very extreme.
But then he is a sportsman. And to be honest, elite athletes are often... It's chicken and egg, isn't it? They are driven to be brilliant because they have that obsessive mindset. But within that obsessive mindset comes a bit of a curse that they can't switch it off.
Well, and that's what... Of course, he's retired now. So all of that energy that was previously going into football is now, dispersed elsewhere.
That's right.
My husband's got a bit of OCD. The kid, he's not got OCD around the house, sadly, but he does have it in the kitchen. And if I drop like a spot of olive oil on a thing, he's there with a cloth, and I think, what do you have at a surface on a kitchen board? It's to drop olive oil and wipe it up.
Yeah.
He's there, and it drives me mad, drives me insane. And if I put a dirty knife down, he takes it away, and I think, oh. So I can't imagine what life for Victoria is like.
Yeah.
It's like, that's full on, that is, throughout the whole house.
Does she smile at all during the documentary?
You know what? I don't think she ever smiles ever. I think she's been told she doesn't look as pretty when she does.
It's hard to remember a picture of her smiling. It has to be said.
Well, she's very self-conscious,
she's always had that kind of pouty thing. She clearly believes that's how she looks best. And I mean, as I say, she's a very pretty woman. So she's started a makeup range now, and it's interesting that she's making shed-loads. She's making no money out of her clothing range.
That's right.
This makeup range, you've got no idea. everyone I know, every woman I know has bought some of the makeup and they're going, oh, she's got this contour thing. And I'm thinking...
Have you, Emma?
Yes, I bought a silver eyeliner.
Did you?
Victoria Beckham's range.
I haven't bought any of it.
I bought nothing because I don't believe it. I just don't believe the hype. You know, she's talking about this contour thing, this pencil, that suddenly makes your nose look wafer thin and make you look like you have a jaw like Angelina Jolie.
Well, how ridiculous.
Well, I have a contour stick from another brand, so...
I mean, honestly, isn't it ridiculous? But this is, you know why this makeup brand is doing so well? Because on Instagram now, on social media, the teenage girls in particular are hooked on these makeup videos.
Yeah, my niece watches them
endlessly obsessed with makeup.
Well, do you buy stuff off Insta? Because I am tempted to buy every damn thing.
I do, and I get sucked in, and I'm normally very good, but the algorithms are so powerful.
Yeah.
And I click through, and then I bought something.
I've never, ever been on Instagram.
Darling, we know, because you can't get... You don't know how to
do it. You should have seen me trying to put the seatbelt on in the minibus coming back from...
I can just imagine you all on the bus. Was there drink on the bus?
There was a lot of drink on the bus. Beverly Turner drank most of it.
There was some stiff competition, believe me. First-class stamps. Now, again, this is one of those old versus new, you know, the kind of the digital revolution that we're in, really, Emma, isn't it, this story? Because a first-class stamp now costs £1.25.
That's more expensive than the card.
That's absolutely crazy. Yeah, you can buy a card for 50p in some supermarkets.
Do you send anything anymore? Do you send anything by post with a stamp on?
Yeah.
I do.
I've stopped sending Christmas cards a few years ago, and I just do an electronic. Well, there you go. I did get you a Christmas present.
You did, and I bought you one too.
There you go, you see.
Very nice book on cats.
It was.
Yeah. I've used stamps all the time.
Well, but I think this would be my last Christmas card year. I'm not paying £1.25 yet. But, you know, the post office are justifying this raise and saying that, you know, the volume of people posting letters has gone down from 20 billion in 2004.
It's so expensive.
Yeah, to something like 7 now. Because in 2004 it was 28 pence to send a postal letter. Now it's £1.25. Shocking. No one's going to pay.
Frankly, they don't get there any quicker than a second class.
It's supposed to be next day delivery. It's never next day delivery.
Never.
Right, ladies, thank you so much. Emma Bennell, Carol Malone, great to see you as always. We've come to the end of our show. Now we're going to be back with Britain's Newsroom tomorrow morning at...
Hello there. Very good morning. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Definitely a mixed picture across the UK during today. We've already got rain spreading into parts of Northern Ireland, really quite a wet, damp start to the day here. That is pushing its way into western parts of Scotland and then will eventually reach parts of Northern England and Wales as well. But southeastern areas of England and even the far northeast of Scotland in the Northern Isles staying largely dry for most of the day with some sunny spells as well. Will be southeastern England that sees those higher temperatures though, generally reaching around 19 degrees Celsius. A bit cooler where you are stuck underneath the rain and particularly for northeast Scotland around 12 degrees Celsius there. Quite gusty at times, some gales around the Irish Sea coastal areas. That rain though will spread its way eastwards as we head throughout this evening and overnight. Eventually a few drabs pushing their way across southeastern areas as well, but most places largely turning dry as we head into the second half of the night. Still just some random showers pushing their way through at times. A lot of cloud around though and still the breeze in place, so that will help mix up the air and prevent our temperatures dropping too far at all. Most of us seeing quite a mild night around 14-15 degrees Celsius. We then see this lingering rain start to push its way into parts of Scotland throughout Friday. This pulse as it heads in later on in the afternoon as well could provide some quite heavy and persistent rain, so worth watching out for that. But again, a fairly fine dry start and end to the day across southern areas with some sunny spells in there as well.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it is 12 o'clock and you are with the Live Desk here on GB News. Coming up this Thursday lunchtime.
Sunak's in Spain for the Italian job. How a European summit could see a new accord with Italy's leader Giorgia Meloni on sharing EU intelligence on the migrant crisis. We're live in Granada.
What's the cost of treason? We're at the Old Bailey, where a man's being sentenced under the Treason Act of 1842 for carrying a loaded crossbow, saying he wanted to kill Queen Elizabeth II.
Rents through the roof as monthly bills outside London now average £1,278 a month, and scores queue to bid for what becomes available.
And are the bedbugs on their way here through the Channel Tunnel? Eurostar starts taking special measures after tourist bosses in Paris complain the French capital is being overrun by les punaises de lit. Before we start, I'm feeling itchy thinking about it. Before we start, here's your headlines with Rhiannon.